The premise of your story is stated in one sentence. It combines character and plot and ties them to a specific event that triggers the basis of the entire story. Take the premise in The Godfather. The youngest son of a mafia family takes revenge on the men who shot up his daddy and becomes the new godfather. Because who needs a father when you can become your own daddy? Modern problems, modern solutions. Oh, and by the way, spoilers for the following works. If you haven't seen them, I don't know what to tell you. Neither have I. Example 2 from Star Wars. When a princess falls into mortal danger, a young man uses his skills as a fighter to save her and defeats the evil forces of the Galactic Empire. Alright, so maybe at this moment I thought of making a stepsister premise in which she gets stuck in a washing machine and it's up to the stepbrother's great response. So here's another example from Casablanca. A cynical American expatriate rediscovers an old flame, only to give her up so he can fight the Nazis. Find your premise and write it good, my friend. It is the one decision on which every other decision made during this writing process is based. This means characters, plot, theme, symbol, and all the like. Premise allows you to explore the full story unfold. It is the foundation of your story. And I don't have to tell you what happens to weak foundations. Nor myself. Alright, so there's just about 10 steps in this mother. Look at this page here for later reference. It will make more sense then. Step 1. Write something that may change your life. Let it be something important to you. You're human. And so if you write a story based on something that moves your heart, something that is personal, chances are it will have the same effect on the audience, in addition to rising above the generic. Step 2. Look for what's possible. Brainstorm the several paths an idea can take and choose the one you fancy most. Think of the simplest premise and then expand upon it in a way that will make the story unique. Make it stand out. Take the example of Tootsie. The premise is simple. A man dresses up as a woman to get around easier in the movie industry. But wait! What if the good man is actually a sexist and a misogynist that sees women as objects, but now has to dress like one? How about that? Imagine all the situations you could put him through to reflect his treatment of women. What if, in attempting to mock, he is forced to realize the error of his ways through first-hand experience? And I mean that literally. Okay, so maybe this example makes me sound like a simp, so how about another one, just to be safe? The premise is simple. The youngest son of a mafia family takes revenge on the men who killed his daddy, and then succeeds them in the business of crime. See, this is a cool-ass premise about mafia gangbang. But wait, what if it was more? What if beneath the surface, the story is actually a modern Shakespearean tragedy, where one evil falls and another rises in its place, where a good man starts off with the just motivation of vengeance, but is then transformed into the very thing he... Well, you get the idea, good son. Let's move on. Step 3. Identify story challenges and problems. Think of all the possible roadblocks your premise implies. With the example of Tootsie, the challenge of the writers was to show the effect of men's immoral treatment towards women without making it seem as though all men are assholes and women are angels, which they are. Basically, how do you write about an issue without making it appear one-dimensional? The problem is, how do you make a man believable as a woman, while at the same time writing a comedy based around the idea? The movie is also a romance, or the trap ends up falling for another woman. So, how does a friend-zoned lesbian explain that he was a man all along? Imagine pretending to be gay at a girl sleepover, and then they whip out one of those big black things they call toys, and suddenly that is not worth it. Step 4. Find the designing principle. The designing principle is a highlight here, see. See, the premise is your story in one sentence, yeah? It's what actually visibly happens. But the designing principle is the abstract that deepens the premise. It's what adds originality to a basic action movie or rom-com idea. It's what organizes the story as a whole. It's the internal logic, the seed of the story. Now look at this formula here for the designing principle. Designing principle equals story plus original execution. See, the ideas of drag queens and mafia overtakings are premises worked over and over like a cheap doll. But because of the designing principle, Tootsie makes itself stand out by forcing a male chauvinist to live as a woman. Because of the designing principle, The Godfather differentiates itself with the classic fairy tale strategy of showing how the youngest of the three sons becomes the new king. And this is only one interpretation out of several the story takes. You can easily create the designing principle through traveling metaphors and symbols. Like for example, like the big girl Alice who falls down the rabbit hole into an upside down world of wonderland. Or like the red letter A in the scarlet letter. Or the mountain in the magic mountain. Those examples don't seem to help very much. Look at these here. In the premise of Harry Potter, a young boy discovers he has magical powers and attends the school for magicians. The designing principle is that a magician prince learns to be a man and a king by attending a boarding school of sorcerers over the course of 7 school years. The premise in A Christmas Carol is that when 3 ghosts visit a stingy old man, he regains the spirit of Christmas. The designing principle: trace the rebirth of a man by forcing him to view his past, his present, and his future over the course of one Christmas Eve. And lastly, in It's a Wonderful Life, the premise is that when a man prepares to commit suicide, an angel shows him what the world would be if he had never been born. And in the designing principle, the author expresses the power of the individual by showing what a town and a nation would be like if one man had never lived. Pick the best actor to carry the idea of your premise and the designing principle. This doesn't mean he has to be the nicest person. He can be the biggest asswipe on the face of the planet, for sake. But make him likable. Let it be that whoever you have in mind to carry the story is the most fascinating and possibly the best choice in terms of how complex you can make him. Well, at least you certainly want someone charismatic. Step 6. Get a sense of the central conflict. Ask yourself, what is my story about at the most essential level? Whom is the hero fighting? What are they fighting about and why? And after you've asked yourself this thing, draw your answer in one definitive sentence and have it besides your designing principle. Think of the spine in alphabetical order. It's cause and effect. A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to F, and so on. Also, you should watch out for split premises, like this example here. A man falls in love and fights his brother for control over a winery. You see how that sounded? The problem with a premise like this is that it has 2 spines of cause and effect. There's the possibility for romance, but then again it could be a story about control over a winery. I mean, if you want to do both, that's fine. You can still do both, but it just has to be fixed and structured in a way that implies cause and effect. As such, through the love of a good woman, a man defeats his brother for control over a winery. Think of it as What is the hero's basic action that's causing them to act? In The Godfather, it's revenge. The youngest son of a mafia family takes revenge on the men who killed his father and becomes the new leader. And I suppose you could pull it out of an inciting incident, like this Star Wars example. When a princess falls into mortal danger, a young man uses his skills as a fighter to save her and to defeat the evil forces of the Galactic Empire. Notice the basic action that unites all else and creates a legitimate spine. It doesn't even matter if you intend on creating several main characters, which is, well, a thing of its own, but all storylines should eventually converge into one, like that scene in The Avengers. Step 8. Determine hero character change. Character change is invoked by your hero's experiences of struggle throughout the story. Positive or negative, you want the most satisfying conclusion to your hero's character change. And you can accomplish this with a simple geometric equation. W multiplied by A equals C. The W stands for winning, weakness, which is both psychological and moral. The A stands for basic action amidst the story. And because of this basic action, a character with a certain weakness is put through hell throughout the entire plot that it forces change at the end of the tunnel. And thus, C stands for changed person. Now, if you're bad at math, this is confusing to you and I can't help you there. Just kidding, I got your back, mate. Let's solve this together. See, think of weakness as who your hero is at the very start. And because of this basic action throughout, he emerges out the mother, changed for the better or worse. Like, peep this example from Star Trek. The premise is simple. When a princess falls into mortal danger, a young man uses his skills as a fighter to save her and to defeat the evil Galactic Empire forces. And so the weakness is that the big girl starts off naive, unfocused, hasty, a timid soy boy, and no drip. The basic action is that he uses his skills as a fighter. Multiply those together and by the end he is a changed person. He regains self-esteem, he's a better fighter, he has a place among the chosen, mad drip, chillis. But then look at what they did with the premise for Godfather. Revenge was his basic action, but he started off with the weakness of being unconcerned, afraid, and generally distant from family. You multiply those together and in the end the man was a tyrant, an absolute emperor, and a literal devil on earth. The Godfather is a perfected example of reversing the purpose of weakness and basic action. For frick's sake, the good man had a fall arc. The good man had a negative character change. Or, well, I forgot which is which between those two terms, but, well, you understand. Step 9. Fingering the moral choice. This is your view of how people should act in the world. It's what you're trying to say. What are you trying to tell us, Chief? What is your moral argument? And please, whatever it may be, dare you not sermonize that through a monologue. I will hunt you down. I will know where you live. I will pull up on your threshold. And we shall have words. Maybe even violence, depending on how big you are. Just remember to show, not tell. Do it through the characters. Key point in moral choice. For a true moral choice to be had, your hero must choose between two positive or negative outcomes, and both of which must be as equal as possible in difficulty of choosing. I recall a recent moral choice I witnessed when I binge-watched WandaVision. The villain witch had to choose between staying with her dead made-up husband and imaginary children, or releasing the town's good people from eternal genjutsu. And so you see, in choosing one good, the big girl gives up the other. But wait, have you heard of that movie, Sophia's Choice, where the mother was forced to choose between which one of her children will go to the gas chamber? That shit was dark. An ultimate example of a negative moral choice. Step 10. Well, me, we're finally at the end. Have I ever spoken so much in one day? Any more words would emerge out my f***ing mouth and I would have turned into a racist. Alright, look. You want to be a writer with a good premise. A premise that will turn heads and make your story the next hot thing in the 5 minutes of fame or something. Like, you know that show Attack on Titan? That show is lit. I mean, you should write for yourself first and foremost. But don't forget, you're a writer and one day you're gonna want someone to read your life's work. So try to make a premise that's reasonably appealing to market. As John Truby would put it, your writing should mean a lot to you personally. But writing for an audience makes it a lot easier to do what you love. Well, that's all I've got for you for today, you bright burning star. If you fell in love with me, subscribe to my OnlyFans. Link in description. But until then...